So today we're going to look at using the Radial filter in Lightroom. Let's get started. We find the Radial filter when we select Develop inside of Lightroom. So I'm using Lightroom Classic. You would click under Develop, and over here on the top of the right under your histogram is this round Radial filter, or you can press Shift M. And so we select it, and then you can drag it across an area. And basically you can grab a hold of these ends, turn it out this way, or we can shift it around to kind of suit whatever we need to have done. If we hold down Shift and we pull out, it makes the whole radial filter, the boundary, shift altogether, versus if we just move it without holding anything down, we only shift this one side. We can also hold the Alt key down, which allows us to pull out the side that we have a hold of without it actually affecting the other side. So those are good to know things. So down here at the bottom is where we set up the filter at. So we have this thing called invert here, and if I'm going to turn the range mask on and then we'll look at that. But if I turn this luminance mask on, you can see when invert is not checked, it's basically affecting everything outside of the radial filter boundary. And if we click it, and so invert is now selected, it basically selects everything inside the radial filter boundary. Now, we also have this up here which affects the feathering, so how hard do you want the basically the effects that you're applying to the photograph to be. It defaults at 50. And then down here we have the mask. So the mask is really what makes this tool really, really useful. Down here we got three choices. So there's depth, right? I'm not really going to cover depth, but to use depth you need to have a camera like the new iPhone that records depth. And if you use that, then you can select the radial filter and say, I just want to apply these effects to the background or to the foreground. And there's data in the picture to actually let Lightroom know where that effect should be applied. Now, if we use luminance, so now I've selected luminance, and I come in here and you can see we're affected inside the circle here. Now, if I grab this right side of the range and move it in, basically what it does is it focuses on the highlights, right? You can see now it's stopped impacting. If we drag it over here a little bit farther to this darker area, it's no longer impacting the black sections of the picture, right? And the farther over we move it, the more it centralizes into the highlights. So, and now if we go the other way, it's going to leave the waterfall alone, and it's going to focus in on those darker areas. And then we have smoothness. If you apply smoothness, it basically is like the feathering, where it's how hard is that effect going to be? Are we going to apply it just, a really hard edge or a soft edge, which is like the feathering? So that's this one, right? If we select color, and I'm going to go over this, I'm just showing you the basics here of where it's at, and then we'll go over how we use them. But if you select color, now I have this eyedropper tool, and I can select, like I want this color here. Maybe I got a couple colors I want to deal with, and I can hold the Shift key down and come through and select these colors. If we got a couple different variations of the same color. And now whenever I come back up into the picture and I change the exposure levels, right, it only impacts those colors that I've selected, which is really good. I mean, because we're being very, very localized now. If we were not using the radial filter and we came in here and we adjusted just the exposure, well, it impacts the entire picture. The radial filter allows us to be very selective in what we're actually applying these changes to. Let's look at how we're going to actually use this. So I'm going to use it on this picture here of this waterfall. I'm going to change my color profile to Adobe Landscape. And then I think I'm going to apply auto settings just to do a quick update on everything on the picture. Now I'm going to use the Radial filter up here on the sky that we can see at the top of the waterfall, because the sky's too bright. So I'm going to come and basically dull that down a little bit so it's not so overpowering. So I'm coming down here. I'm going to click invert because I only want the changes to be applied inside the circle. I'm choosing luminant, right, as my mask type. And now I'm only going to want to update the highlights. So I'm going to drag the left side of the range up until I'm just getting the sky. Now I'm going to come back up here to the top. Well, hold on. I'm going to turn my range mask off now so I can see what's actually happening when I make my adjustments. And I'm going to drag the exposure down a little bit, just to dull down that sky. Now I think what we're going to do is we'll put another range mask down here on the bottom to bring the greens out on the moss on the rocks, just to show you how to use the color mask on the color mask on the Radial filter. So we put the Radial filter down here on the bottom. We're going to scroll down, select color for your range mask, right? And now we have this eyedropper tool. So I'm going to come through and grab, or basically select, different locations where the green is at. So what I'm doing is I'm holding down the shift key and clicking on the locations with the eyedropper of the colors that I want to impact with this mask. Okay, so I've got my colors selected. I'm going to invert the mask because I only want to impact the colors inside of the circle. And I'm going to bring these greens up, just saturate them a little bit more than they were, just to show you how to do this. So you could do this with any color or group of colors. Okay, and I'm just going to bring up the clarity down here just a little bit, and it just impacts inside of this range mask on that color. Now, I think what we're going to do is add another mask, because over here in Gibson's Cave, right, it's really dark, and so we want to brighten this up a little bit. So what we're going to do now is come down here. We're going to invert the mask because we only want to change what's inside the circle in the cave. I'm going to turn luminance on. Now I'm going to turn my luminance mask on so I can see what I'm impacting, and I'm going to drag this range slider with the right limitation down to the left until I'm just impacting the shadow areas. And I'm going to increase the exposure in this area. Now I can crank this way up, right? But this is going to make the picture look bad. So I'm only going to do a little bit of a change here. Now I can come back down here, and so if I adjust this range mask, you can see how it basically expands out that exposure. And so I can kind of adjust this to where I want it to be adjusted, and I can increase or decrease the level of basically smoothness, where it's going to be a hard effect or a soft effect, and I want kind of a soft effect. And so there we go. So now we can see the back of what's called Gibson's Cave. And I'm going to increase the clarity just a little bit inside that range mask. And I'm also going to increase saturation just a touch. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put a range mask over the waterfall, a radial mask or a radial filter over the waterfall to kind of bring the waterfall out and make it really kind of the center of the picture. I want to draw people's eye to the waterfall. So I'm going to apply this range mask, and this is not inverted, right? So it's applying to everything outside the circle. So I'm just decreasing the exposure just a bit. And I didn't want to have any clipping, so I'm coming back up to my histogram where I decrease that basically exposure level, and I've had some clipping in the shadow section, so I'm shifting that a little bit to the right. Okay. So let's look at the before and after. So we started on the left before, and our picture on the right is after the effects we applied, so we're looking pretty good. Now, what I think I'm going to do is I want to bring the waterfall out just a little bit more. So let me, I can decrease the exposure more, right? But I think what I want to do is actually increase the, basically the light on the waterfall. So I'm going to replicate this filter. And so now I have two filters, right? Well, I'm going to click invert because I only want to impact inside the circle. Now I can increase exposure, but I think what I'm going to do, let me straighten out these other settings here. And I think what we're going to end up doing is using the dehaze filter. I kind of like how that kind of provides a more natural looking light effect than the by increasing the exposure. So let's go back and take a look now. So I'm pretty happy with that. So now let's take a look at how we can use the radial filter as a simulated light source. This is a picture of a shipwreck that I took down in Cornwall in the UK. And so what we're going to do is we're going to apply this radial filter and make it look like it's light shining on the sides of the ravine here. And so we kind of place our light source, or our radial filter. We're going to stretch it out to kind of how we want it to look on this. And we can increase the exposure when we need to invert it because we only want to impact what's inside the circle in this case. And I'm also going to drop the dehaze down because that gives us a little bit more natural looking light effect than just by cranking the exposure. And I'm going to warm this up. So I can basically move this light source around kind of wherever I want it to be. I can move it over here so it looks like it's shining on this hill over here. I can shift it so it looks like it's coming in from the top right side of the picture, or actually it would look like more from the so I need to stretch this out, but so you kind of get the idea where I can make it look like, let's take a look and see what this looks like after I shifted it down here onto the bottom. So you can kind of see now it looks like there is light on that right hand side of the ravine and up into the top. And we can look at a before and after and kind of see what we've done to the image, where we've kind of lightened up the center there and gave it a little bit more depth with the light on the side. So this is Pendine Lighthouse in Cornwall. And so what we're going to do is I took this picture out whenever I was doing a survey for night photography. So what we're going to do is try to make this look like it's nighttime and the light is on. And so let me get rid of that filter, and what we're going to do is we're going to place a radial filter over the lighthouse just to provide it some glow. So normally I would do this in Photoshop, and this is not really a thing I would normally do, but it is kind of a good illustration of how you can use the radial filter to do a variety of things. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this picture I've got and make it look like it's nighttime and the light's on. So I'm going to cool that background quite a bit and make it look dark. I'm going to drop the exposure on everything except for the actual light. So if you've not been to this lighthouse, this is one of the few lighthouses that's left that's still working that has a normal rotating light instead of LED lighting. So you can get some pretty interesting effects with this. But so what we're going to do is we're going to create another radial filter off of this one that we've got, where we've got the glow on there. And we're just going to want to adjust the temperature inside here. So basically I've duplicated the radial filter, and I'm going to try to bring it, because we don't want it to look too outlandish here. So, and then I'm going to create another radial filter, and I'm going to drag it across, and this is going to be the beam coming out of the lighthouse. And so I'm dragging it well past the lighthouse, but now I'm going to shift it back over to the right. And what we're going to do is we're going to change the dehaze and the saturation and increase the warmth on this. So we want to invert it because we only want what's into the circle to change. We're going to put a luminance mask on, and we're only going to basically, we're going to drag it down just a little bit. Turn that off, and now we're going to come up here. We're going to increase the warmth in this a lot because we want that nice yellow glow of the light. We're going to drag the dehaze down. Dehaze really provides a lot better natural light. Now the exposure is really going to increase the and we're going to do the whites down. I don't really want to mess with the blacks too much. And I'll increase that saturation inside of there. Just a hair, I think. And scoot that out a little bit. I don't want it popping out the back of the lighthouse, right? Get it kind of set where the light would be. And there you have it. Lighthouse, nighttime with the light on. So anyway, interesting ways you can use the radial filter. Hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please do me a favor and click like and subscribe down below. That would help my channel out tremendously if you could do that. So if you have any suggestions on things you'd like to see, please leave comments in the comments section, and I appreciate any critiques. And thanks. Everybody have a good day, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye.